Call them today at 466-4938.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Thought That Get Results. I'm Everett Weber Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something that fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis. Or you can give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, a piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized. And we're getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves, and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem not within our broadcast standards. Also, you can follow us by our Facebook page, and also on YouTube. You log on to YouTube, you click subscribe, and you got us there. You click on and you see the streaming live to this program, and you can follow us, the video link, live on Facebook and also on YouTube. And also you can follow the streaming audio by our website, vaughanradio.com. So lots of ways you can get in touch with us, and we thank you very much, those of you who have been following us. Tonight, the Honorable Spencer Brand, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and a very pleasant good evening to my colleagues around the table. Let me say good evening to all those who are listening and viewing to us at this time, to those who are in our various hospitals throughout St. Kitts and Nevis, and to those who are seeking medical assistance overseas. I certainly hope that they will be up and about pretty shortly. To those families who are in mourning tonight, I want to take this opportunity to offer my heartfelt and sincere condolences. To those who are celebrating tonight, whether it's a birthday, a wedding anniversary, or some accomplishment in their life, I want to offer them my congratulations, and I hope that they are having a wonderful evening. Webo, it's indeed good to be back here once again, and I want to say a very special good evening to Ted, who is doing well. To all those who normally allow us in their homes or in their car or in their workplace, it is indeed our pleasure to be back once again, and I'm indeed looking forward to tonight's discussion. Thanks, Webo, for the invitation once again.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts, and more especially gracious people of Nevis and those who will be listening to us on the World Wide Web and throughout the Caribbean Basin. Again, those who will be viewing us on Facebook and YouTube. It's always a pleasure for us to come through with information to tell you what's happening in Nevis locally, and we hope that we would have a bridge extended with information coming from here through to you, and you would be coming from where you are through to us, for us to have a conversation, whatever the subject matter would be. We'd be able to take it on to make our people more informed and also to carry us upward and onward. Good evening, Webo.
Conrad Nair Liebert, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and to my colleagues around the table. Pleasant good evening to the youths of Nevis and St. Kitts and the wider region. I say a special good evening. But also I want to say a very extra special good evening tonight to the elders in our community. I often speak of the youths as we demand of them the best behavior, because we always say they are the leaders of tomorrow, but we can't forget the elders in the community. And tonight I just want to hail them up, because so often the older folks meet me and I always have a lot to say, even today. And they're always in tune, even more so than the younger ones. So, a special good evening to them, Webber, and I'm happy to be here once again.
Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and thanks for the invitation to join the esteemed panel tonight. Webo, I would just like to take this opportunity to say a good evening to, there's a chap I met from St. Martin, Carl, and I think most of the people here might know Carl. I met him at a not so joyous occasion, but he was such a pleasant person to meet. Carl, wherever you are, I know you say sometimes the reception is not that good. I hope it is perfect tonight. Good evening to you. To Marilyn, my friend Marilyn, thanks for the encouragement. And I would like to add my voice to Mr. Brand's voice to say good evening to Mr. Hobson, wherever you are. I hope you're doing well. Webo, it is a pleasure to be here, and thanks again.
Dr. Patricia Bartlett, Conrad Nye Liburd, Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand. And a footnote here, I did mention last month that we, at the station here, we were working on a documentary on Ted Hobson, and we said that we were going to release it this month. So keep your eyes and your ears open. We don't have the exact timing yet, but it will be released this month. So please take note of that. Okay. Edric, you wanted to say something else?
well, sometimes we have unfinished business, and I must say to you that a few people met me on the streets and they mentioned, but how come we were attempted to figure out this large window? Now, I said, Webo obviously knows of the large window because sometimes he believes what I tell him. There are times he has to trust but verify. And that evening, which was last Tuesday, the verification on your part came up. And of course, I had to reiterate as to how this window came about. And thus, they said, well, all Webo has to do, ask a few people who have been to St. Croix, most of whom would always try and figure out where Edric Stanley lived. And but if, for some reason, he has not been able to talk to those people, maybe I should give him a call and to tell him, I am aware of the window, and thus. But Webo also, man of his stature, can Google it, and he would find the exact location of that building. And it might, probably just might see the window. That is, of course, part of the unfinished business from last week. Another topic which was brought to the fore.
You told Mr. Brand what this window was all about because he wasn't here and he doesn't understand. So I'll give you another minute. Tell him what the window was all about.
You see, you are in the catbird's seat where you are. And sometimes we have our little conversations here. As a result, he has been apprised of what we spoke about.
Oh, you
briefly.
told him?
Oh, yes. So.
And he believed you?
That's another matter. That is
I know it's
matter.
another matter. That's why I asked.
That's another matter. Like I said, trust.
No, did he believe you?
I can't tell you that, Webo. The entire thing.
In your opinion, did he believe you when you told him about the window?
Yes.
Okay.
You say, in my opinion.
Yes.
Well, I've answered.
Okay.
The next part of the unfinished business, last week, I brought to the fore that building at Prospect, and I thought we might have been able to expound upon it and to have gone a little further to have figured out why it is still there and not being utilized based on what Naya brought to the fore. So I think we might be able to flesh it out a little more this evening.
Which building?
It is the building that was designed, I guess, for stray animals, as the case might be.
Okay, and you checked it out and you found out why?
No, I've seen the building. I've seen the construction. I've seen the exterior completion, but I've not gone into the building.
And as a result of having seen the outside, seeing the structure and so on, that is the basis on which you conclude we might be able to flesh it out tonight?
Well, we have Dr. Bartlett here. She is part of and parcel of
Okay.
that.
And
I also
Mr.
know
Brand.
that there was a lady,
And Mr. Brand.
Mr. Brand,
Okay.
and I also know there is a lady who is part of the animal welfare
Who is not
association. She's not here,
Okay.
but she has been on your show, and she extensively
And as a
spoke.
consequence of she being on
No, I'm
my
just
show,
saying that these are little things
work
that I
with
bring
me,
to the-
work
to
with
the
me,
fore.
work with me, Mr. Stanley. No, and I'm following you. Dr. Bartlett is here. Based on her position, you're suggesting she might have some information. Mr. Brand is here. He's a part of the administration. He might have some information. Sounds good to me. But you also added there's a lady who was on my show some time ago, and as a consequence, what? She will have some information?
Based on what she told me at a point in time, that she's involved with animals and she was attempting to work alongside or
Okay,
had
so
information.
you will
I-
use
I-
some information that she
no,
gave you to
no,
help?
I don't have much information, only to say that I know that they have bought the Remax building over at Nelson Spring.
I'm narrowing it down, so what does that have to do with
I'm
the,
just
the
saying
other
that,
part?
that
Because we're going to try and solve this thing, because that's what you said we'll do, no?
all right, yeah, sure, Weber.
Okay, so-
But let's leave it like that.
Oh,
Naya's
leave it
the one
like
who
that.
brought it to the fore, but as you went through again, you didn't bring Naya, who is the architect of the issue.
Yeah, but it wasn't Naya who.
Yeah, I just an observer, passerby, realizing 4 or 5 years the building is there and I
Right.
know what's going on.
And then he said that based on what he has gathered, we'll flesh it out.
Okay, go ahead.
That's not what. And no, okay, well, to be fair to you, so you're saying now that you've been cross-examined, you would like to leave the case until another time.
No, let's flesh it
Oh,
out.
let's
Let's
flesh
figure
it
out
out,
what's
okay.
going on.
So go
Naya
ahead
brought
now.
it to the fore, and I'm just saying I am passing the ball in this
To
game
Naya?
of- to a basketball back to the architect of the issue.
That gotta be the best light moment that I've heard for a while. Naya, let's see what you'll do with the pass, because he said he passed it to you.
Well, I probably pass it around because, as I say,
I got
I
him.
was just a passerby.
I got him.
Observing
I
my
got the
local
message. I got the message. Having said that, though, Mr. Brand, you have any thoughts in it?
Well,
Any ideas or anything you can give
I
us?
must admit I don't have all the facts, Webo, and I don't want to give any misinformation or wrong information. So I would probably err on the side of caution.
Okay.
But I must admit I really don't have all the facts on that particular issue.
Okay. Here, what I'm going to suggest. And well, let me do this first. Dr. Bartlett, you have any information on it?
Well, everybody passing around the ball, but I don't want to score an own goal, see? So I'm not going to play the ball because I
Okay.
might just end up playing an own goal, scoring an own goal, and I don't want to
Okay.
score against
Well,
myself.
I've been around this joint for a while. So here's what I'm going to suggest. You keep passing the ball, so I'm going to suggest you pass it on to somebody who I know is not afraid to play the ball since he's in the wicket. I'm going to suggest that somebody calls the Premier tomorrow night, because I've never seen or known him that anything that falls under his purview be passing it around. Because to me, it is a fair point. Or, I was going to say the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, Deputy Premier, but I don't think he's on Monday nights. He was on last night, but he doesn't take call on that program. But I'm sure the Premier perhaps will be able to, because I think it is a fair question, and I think that the public will like to know as well. It is their concern. And as I said, as far as I know, until he proves otherwise, the Honorable Mark Brantley, the Premier, has never been a person to shy away from, addressing something that falls under, that he is ultimately responsible for. Okay. What else we've got, Mr. Edrick?
Well, I mentioned last week, just as we were closing the program, which I was hoping that a half a minute of the midday news would have been curtailed just to get that extra plug-in, and this would have been for the people of Four Seasons, those who might be furloughed and those who are still there. But based on what we have heard at the time, was that the homeowners, some who are quite wealthy, have decided to chip in with reference to those people who would be there, who would be working, with regard to additional amounts with reference to their salaries or whatever the remuneration would be. And in that regard, I have to say the Premier has done some legwork in that area with reference to touching the bases, the banks and other financial institutions who would have monies out there, some of the monies will be coming from those people who are working at Four Seasons, and they've been asked to forego for a short period of time the liability or the load and give some slack to those people who have to pay their loans and mortgages, as the case might be. And thus, it is showing that people who are at a certain level of authority and position sometimes use their leverage to get a helping hand to the less fortunate. And in this regard, Premier Mark Bradley has actually touched bases with the people of Four Seasons and also the villa owners, the banks, and other institutions to help defray the load in this short period of time. So he's out there working. We all are working. We all must do our part in order to keep our community, country, and peoples going forward and upward, financially afloat. Webo.
Okay. Anybody else would like to address anything before I get into some other stuff?
Webo, there is a story that I've been following for a little while, maybe for the last 2 weeks, out of Trinidad and Tobago. And I've been doing some checks, and it's a matter that has to do with the math exam, the CXC math exam, where it was alleged that there may have been some untoward stuff that may have happened in Trinidad. And I've been watching and monitoring the story, Rebel. There have been a number of articles written in the Jamaica newspaper and the Antigua newspaper about it. And there seemed to have been a push to have the entire math exam retaken. My sources are telling me, my folks on the ground here are telling me that from their sources that there may not have been any breach as were indicated, and there may not necessarily be the need to retake that exam. A number of persons have been concerned because from what I've been hearing, the math exam was a challenging one, and some students were a little concerned whether they would have to do it over again or not. But it's a story about that I know some parents and some students are being concerned about, and I think that the concern is justified, because I think that when we hear of these kind of alleged incidents, it have an effect on person's psyche who would have taken those exams, parents who would have had to pay for these exams, and so on and so forth. So it was a story that I've been watching, and from all reports, it appears as though they may not have to retake that exam, because that they appear to have been not the breach that some of these articles were indicating. So I believe that students and the parents can possibly rest a bit more easy that they may not have had to take that exam once again. So it's a story that I think is still drifting around, and I think that there is still some concern about it. And I believe that our people would probably need to give the clear indication one way or the other as to what will happen and alleviate all of the fears that some parents and some students are having.
I think the CXC council has made a definitive
Yeah.
statement.
Yeah.
But, you know, the last part of your comment, though, I find it interesting how, and I applaud you for, you know, taking the opportunity of the forum that you have now to you know, try to allay the fears. But I think we reference, not in this, to this particular topic, but I think we referenced some time ago how alarming it is and intriguing that whenever there is, I don't even want to carry it as far as a crisis, whenever there is a little problem, you can hardly find who is in charge. But when everything is running smooth and calm, you can always know who is the boss and who has authority over what. And whenever there is a problem, you can never find who is in charge to address it. And this is a particular example. And so you have a problem with the math and whether or not the children have to rewrite and the anxiety and so on and so forth. And nobody has the responsibility to go and check into it and make sure that the kids are okay. I think Mr. Brand mentioned something about the psyche will be affected and so on and so forth. But in the next couple of months, when the results come out and they do so well, everybody will be there on the podium giving speeches. Right, Edric? I mean, you don't have a lot of people with the courage like me who can say that, right?
Quite true.
And I don't know what's wrong with me because all my life I've just been doing things like this and getting squeezed on the back end of it. And I just keep doing it. Something is wrong with me. But it has to be done and said.
You have to be.
Right, Mr. Brand?
Yeah, you've weathered the storm well over the years.
You have to step up to the plate and have a soldier mentality.
The
That
squeeze
even
becomes
though
the
they-
norm.
So you think I could have been a soldier?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Bullets are flying from everywhere, but yet with that mentality, you go forward. You go forward because you're part of the war.
Yeah, but that's a good point to bring up, though, Mr. Brand, and at least for us to be aware of that's another security issue again. The different things that people will try. We are part of the global village, so to speak, and you're gonna find tricksters all around because the same way people sit down and study how to build bars and locks and so on, there are other people who are studying how to break them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
well,
Yes.
just a short comment on that. Based on the news clip that came, it didn't seem that there was a major problem more than there were some of the invigilators who, for whatever reason, just didn't step up to the plate to take their responsibility seriously enough to ensure that everything were operating as designed. Because based on the one hand, children who might have had to take the exam or retake the exam, and on the other hand, they, based on the clip, the information that came, the invigilators just didn't supervise the room for the exam, for the examination.
But you would agree that's a statement by CXC, though.
True.
And my skills, professional skills, would tell me that thing need to be
It's deeper than-
cross-examined well too.
It's deeper than that.
It could be. And
sadly.
I'm not saying it is.
Oh,
It,
okay.
it could be because sometimes I would hear certain statements, and within the statement itself, I would say, well, I'd like to cross-examine that information because it doesn't add up. And as my very good friend of long standing would say, sometimes there's something fishy about it.
Well, it is important for us to get to the bottom of it, because there are times people would pass the buck, and there are times when people would sweep things on the rug just to bring it to a conclusion. When it stays on the rug and it festers, and when it reappears, it is more problematic.
Yeah, I'm not,
Then
keep in mind, I'm not doubting it, right? But I'm just saying that based on my vocation, I always keep an open mind and understand who's making the statement and do they have a vested interest in, having it come out a particular way. That's all. Okay. Dr. Bartlett?
Well, Webo, what was brought to my attention? Well, not that I was well aware of it, because I had to pay an increase in my fuel surcharge, and I've been paying more for gas. When I used to tell the guy, I have a small car, and when I used to tell the guy, put in, $50, and I used to be able to drive away, shake the side of the vehicle sometimes to get it filled up, with the $50. I realized I put in $50, and it still hasn't reached up to 3/4 the tank. And so when I looked on the bill, I realized, and I think I would have made the point here, that the gas price is creeping up. And I would just like to ask Mr. Brand if he knows, what is the factor that is the major contributing factor to this increase? Is it because we have now, we're starting to feel the crunch of the Petro-Caribbean agreement? Are we running on fumes as it relates to that particular facilitation that we had? Or is it, I don't know what, I don't know. I'm looking for a way forward. I'm trying to see how I could budget next month. So I just want a little bit of advice. I want to know if things are likely to get any better. If he knows, if we have a reliable source now that could, replace the arrangement that we would have had with the Petro-Caribbean.
Well, you are correct, Dr. Bali. We would have had a special preferential arrangement with Venezuela for the price of fuel. I think that we all recognize the difficulty that Venezuela is facing at the moment. There is serious political instability. There is a clear indication that the U.S. would have virtually shut down the account, so to speak, of Venezuela. They basically can't even buy or sell anything, and it's creating major difficulty for the people in Venezuela. The other side of that, it is also having an effect on the access to some of these territories who would have had that arrangement with Venezuela for that preferential treatment. So obviously it's having an impact, and I would think that that problem may persist a bit, because the situation in Venezuela is still a very fluid one, and I think until that work itself out, there could be some increase in prices. There are other factors globally that continue to create some instability in the price. This situation between U.S. and China, this kind of trade war that is going on, is also creating some jitters in the markets, and it is going to have an effect on us in the Caribbean and throughout the rest of the world. We are also hearing this madness about tariff on Mexico. So all of these kind of things are creating some jitters in the world as it relates to energy. And St. Kitts and Nevis, those who are in the Caribbean are always going to get caught in the crossfire. Our consumption is somewhat small, yes, but at the same time, those larger countries that normally are in line first would always get probably a better price. But it is going to have an effect. A lot of the instability will indeed affect us.
You know what I find is fascinating with that comment by Mr. Brand in terms of the outside forces and the changes and so on, and how it affects us. I find that the reverse does not always happen to be true, meaning that when you begin to watch the world markets and the world prices and so on for the same oil, and they start tumbling down, we don't seem to feel the same rolling down the hill like most people. And it always fascinates me. And as a consequence of that, in order to get some semblance of answer to that, I go to none other than Edric W. Stanley. He was in the oil business.
Yes, yes.
And I look at the markets and so on and so forth. And so please explain to me, Mr. Stanley, why on the one hand, Mr. Brand, I understand his explanation, and why, as Mr. Brand advised me just now, to look at Venezuela, look at the situation in the world and see how difficult it's getting, and we're going to feel that squeeze. Why can't I look at the same indexes when it begins to tumble down and start tumbling down with it as well?
Well, the straight answer is economy of scale. We are a micro market in terms of consumption. And in that regard, we do not move the needle because the commodity of oil is a global product.
I'm going to allow you to
geopolitically-
jump in on him right there, Dr. Bartlett, because
Geopolitically-
no, you hold, let Dr. Bartlett answer there. You're going to continue, but let her just, because she shook her head.
No, let him finish because I don't know.
No, but I was just trying a new strategy. Because
What did he say last week? If you talk long enough.
well,
so you're using that strategy on him. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
well, I'm saying to you,
Yes.
you must face the harsh reality of economies of scale. And we are a micro market. And because of that, in terms of consumption, and because of that, we don't move the needle.
Correct.
And because we don't have the large consumption
So we
quantity.
don't move the needle, the needle moves us.
Well, if you want to use that term, it's up to you. But what I'm saying to you,
But is it a fair, well, I have
yeah,
to use a term that I can understand.
Yes.
So you think it's a fair term?
it's a fair term.
So we don't move the needle needle moves us.
If you want to apply that again,
But I'm asking you if it is fair.
It's a fair term.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So just let me get my fluency going. We don't move the needle moves us, but only in one direction.
Well, quite so. Again, it's based on the lack of quantity.
Even Mr. Brand, who brought that point to the table, is not agreeing with
Well,
you.
he can disagree. But the fact is that you have to face reality. And if for some reason...
Mr. Brand, he disconnected you, right?
No, I'm following him.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we had the capacity to move the needle both ways, it obviously would move.
So,
But
in other words,
with the geopolitical
in other
situation,
words, we are stuck.
we are.
So our prices will always go up and never come down.
Well, that's not true, Webo.
But in essence, that's the point I'm trying to
That's
make.
not true because it fluctuates all the time. I get, as the price moves upward, I get the information, the increase, all the time, weekly or monthly.
but what
I
we
get-
want is
and
not
when the
what
price
we
goes
want
down,
no, but
I
it's
get
not,
also that
but it's
information.
not information we want. What we want is to feel it in the pocket.
Well, sure, but sometimes because it is so
Economies of scale.
based on economy of scale,
You can't
and it's
feel
so
it in the
small,
pocket.
you may not even recognize it.
But
the
on
price
the other
changes
hand,
on the pumps.
on the other hand, the same economies of scale, because we're so small, when it goes down we can't feel it, but when it goes up we do.
Well, you see, based on the fact that it is in your best interest to ensure that it doesn't go up, you are lazily focused on the fact that it has gone up. When it goes down,
As
you
politely
don't
as I-
see it simply
as-
because,
As politely as I can, Mr. Stanley, you have disconnected me.
well, you have disconnected because you're not remaining I'm connected. What I'm attempting to say is that the price of the commodity at the various, let's talk about gasoline and diesel fuels. The price fluctuates all the time here. All the time. But people don't really pay close attention to see the fluctuation. And consequently, we are having this conversation.
No.
People do not see the lowering of the price simply because they are glued to whatever they are glued to when they get to the gas stations. But I guarantee you, in the past 3 months, fuel prices went up and down. In the past 3 months.
Not reflected at the pump, though.
It has reflected. You have not been paying attention.
No, it went up, and it has been up, and it has stayed up now for more, close 3 months. I don't know.
Give me a
what they
timeline.
said.
Give me a timetable.
Well, I can
Because I'm
bring-
telling you, I get the price changes as the price changes.
Yeah, and I can appreciate
And
that.
I
but
know it reflects on the pump because you have to follow the fluctuation. When there's a price increase, you have to put it on. If you want to swallow the increase, only a matter of time before you find yourself with your door closed. And when the fluctuation reaches to the point where it goes down, the pump reflects the lowering of the price. If you as a consumer, and you have not recognized it, it's because you're not paying close attention.
Okay, well, let
For
me
those of
just-
us who are in the industry, I get the price fluctuation as they occur. And you must follow through because it must be reflected on the pumps.
Yes, but you're failing to disclose that if you have gas in the tank, you're not going to sell it any lower than what you bought it for. So even if the price fluctuates, you're not going to pass on that fluctuation, or whether it goes down. Well, if it goes
That's
up,
not true.
That is true.
No, that's not
But
true.
anyway,
You're not in the business, so therefore you don't know.
I think I've explored enough to have an understanding as to how it goes.
Well,
but in any event, what the point I was trying to make earlier, and what I was trying to I was trying to see if I can get an answer to, maybe in an indirect way. I was trying to find out how comfortable are we now as it relates to our source, our supply. Because with the fluctuation as it is, I know I've been paying at least 20% more now for gasoline. I'm not saying that the price has never been at the level as it is now. What I'm saying is that it is there now, and if we do not have a secure supply, which could rival the arrangement that we had with Venezuela, with the Venezuelan oil, I'm asking the question of Mr. Van, if he knows, where are we sourcing petrol from now? And the reason why I ask is because it is high now, and if we don't have a supply that is better than what we had before, it is likely that it's not going to return any lower anytime soon. And so that is why I was asking, and I wanted to find out further if indeed arrangements have been made to make things a little easier on the consumer as it relates to, because if we're not getting it through Petro-Caribbean, or we're not getting it through anywhere in the Caribbean, it means that there's the issue of the external tariffs, the common external tariffs that we all have to, pay. And if that is going to be a consideration for being waived so that people could have, a more comfortable summer. I'm just asking because I don't see us getting any more any increases as it relates to wages. People at Four Seasons will be laid off for 4 months. So that is the concern.
Well, the suppliers of petrol or fuel here in the Federation are international companies, and what they normally do, they normally try to buy their fuel in bulk from the lowest possible supplier. Oftentimes, what I've learned in the past is that they would at times try and lock in a price for, let's say, a 3 months period or 6 months period. So that is one of the mechanisms that I know that they often use to try and lock in certain prices over 3 months, 6 months period. And like I said, they are international companies, and they would source their supply from wherever they can get it at the best possible price. I am of the view that they would be able to continue to provide the necessary products that we need. I think that oftentimes they try to lock in that price, and with the hope that within a 6 months period the price don't vary that much. In the next 3 months or next 6 months they can also lock in a different price. But I am not too worried about the supply of fuel. They, like I said, they are international companies, and they would be able to find various sources where they can get it from at the best possible price.
Well, my concern extends beyond just someone being an international player, because the thing is, if indeed they had access to the Caribbean, the Petro-Caribbean arrangement, in that, I don't know if maybe, Mebo, if you ever had a show here that people got a feeling of understanding as to the way that worked. Because from what I understand is that we, whenever the oil we were getting from Venezuela, we were required only to pay 60% of
having
it.
certain buffers inside of it.
Right,
Yeah.
you know, and up front we can pay 60% of it, and they gave us 3 months to pay that 60%. And then after that, if the price of oil went above $40 per barrel, I understand, the other 40% we pay over 25 years at 1%. Where indeed could we get that kind of arrangement? No. And I still can't imagine that, you know, we would be getting anything close to that. And so that's where my concern about where our source is now. You know, have we, all the bulk oil that we had that came from Venezuela, is that finished? Are we on the fumes now? I mean,
I am not certain if it's finished.
but that's it, because if it isn't finished and they're still digging into it and we're already starting to feel the effects of it, what is to happen? That's just my answer.
But that's an interesting question, because if we were getting this subsidy
Right.
from Venezuela, Mr. Brand said that our suppliers get their stuff from an international market. Mr. Brand, did I understand it
Yes,
correctly?
well, I think the point that I
So-
was trying to make is that to answer Dr. Bartlett's question, if there would be, I think she asked the question, if there would be a continuous supply of fuel, a reliable supply of fuel. The suppliers are international suppliers, Webo, and if they find themselves in certain situation where one source is not available, they often try and find another source where they can get the best possible price. The arrangement that a number of the Caribbean territories would have had, they would have had certain special pricing and preferential treatment and costing and so on built into all of that arrangement. And the idea was that those buffers and those special preferential prices would have been passed on to the consumer. So it is not a matter, Webo, of whether there would be or continue to be a continuous supply of fuel. I think it's just a matter of the supplier and the price.
But here's the definitive question. Nevlec, before the situation in Venezuela, right? So let's go back to when everything was running smooth. Do we know that the fuel that Nevlec, for instance, was getting all the time was from that same arrangement from Venezuela? Because they've been supplied by one of the suppliers here. So is that product comes from that arrangement?
I think it should have been, Webo. It should have been, because Nevlec is quote unquote 100% owned by the government, and that preferential treatment should have been passed on to
So
them.
then that the supplier that supplies Nevlec gets it from there? That's interesting.
Not always, Webo.
Well, but
Not
that's
always.
that's why I'm asking. So so then what is this arrangement all about? Because yeah, go ahead.
The
Not
arrangement was a
always.
political one, and Venezuela is now getting paid back for that arrangement. The reason why Guaido did not succeed is because of that Petrocarib arrangement, where some of the leaders within our region.
Let me ask a specific question. It's not directed at any one person, but the question is, when the arrangement was put in place and everything was coming up roses, Nevlec used to get its fuel via that source? That's the question I want to ask.
I would imagine so.
You imagine so?
Yes.
Okay.
But I would also add that there are times, for whatever reason, the supplier would have to go to other sources to get fuel because of the contractual arrangement with Nevlec to ensure that Nevlec gets its supplies.
Yeah, but
And it
then-
doesn't mean that that price would be maintained
You
at
see, there's
that
something
consistent level.
Now, there's something fishy about that, because if Venezuela is going to work out an arrangement with us, right? And then it has in a clause that you can, in the meantime, go someplace else. That sounds funny to me.
Well, but the
Not-
truth is,
not
though, that
really funny.
sometimes they have
No.
not really supplied us the amount that they had,
Because if-
promised us that we should get. So some
Oh,
of the
really?
countries had issues with that.
If you,
shortfalls.
if you, for one reason, look at the distance between Nevis and Venezuela, the distance between Nevis and St. Croix, where there is a refinery. If for some reason Nevlec is running low on fuel, it would be easier for the supplier to bring in a quick trip from, as a short haul, to ensure that Nevlec stays running.
So in effect, you're suggesting that the agreement or the arrangement might have had that flexibility in it.
Yes, and some of the fuel that we are getting is coming out of Trinidad. I do not know what arrangement we got with Trinidad, but Nevlec right now is being supplied by Delta, and with Delta, Delta gets its fuel, a lot of its fuel, some of its fuel out of Trinidad. So, in the it may not be ironclad, or it has not been concretized with reference to a specific price, but at the same time, based on the space,
Here's
in terms
a-
of markup,
Here's a-
then they probably can operate and still maintain a stable price for Nevlec via Delta.
I know we're trying to do the best we can in a logical way, but here's another open question. Do you know who here on the island might have the expertise to address the questions that we may have?
Sure, you got the manager of Delta, you got the PS of finance. Those are two.
The manager of Delta and the PS for finance.
Yeah,
So you think if I call them, they will be able to answer those?
I can't.
Probing.
I can't tell you that.
No,
But those are two people who are in the know.
they are in. So you think they would know, or should know?
They're in the know.
And
But I'm giving you certain practical scenarios.
What this is? This seems to be something that is some people mustn't ask or touch, because it seems to me as if it's an everyday occurrence, a question. That's what we operate by, and maybe it speaks to when we're talking about the CXC, and whenever there's a little problem, nobody seems to be able to address it. So we want to know, well, how does it work? And then I said, well, who do you think might know?
But I just gave you two people.
And then when I said, so you think maybe if I call them, then you said, well, and I didn't say that.
Well,
There you go.
I can't speak for them, but I'm saying to you,
There should be.
they
able
are
to.
in a position of knowing, simply because you're dealing with a commodity and you're dealing with hard numbers.
Okay, so the
And in that
manager,
regard-
you said the manager of Delta and the PS for who?
For PS Finance,
The PS Finance.
I would imagine that the
And-
Premier would
and-
know as well. I would imagine that by now Cabinet would have been briefed as to the impact the not having access to the petrochemicals.
You
gonna
think
have on the
anybody at
economy.
Nevlec should know?
Well, maybe not. Maybe
No?
they don't. Maybe they don't because they're on a different level. But I would imagine, like I said, that I'm being presumptuous here and say something as important as this. It has something to do with national security. Maybe the person at national security might know. I'm saying the Premier ought to have been, advised as to how we stand as it relates to, our fuel, security. And I would imagine that he would have briefed, Cabinet on where things stand and where they're likely to go. And that's why I asked the question, because Mr. Brand is here, thinking that maybe, by now that might have occurred. But people are already complaining, Somebody told me that, they make sure that they turn off the lights. And because the sun is setting late now, they read until, they can by, the sunlight and, things like that people are doing. But it's going to cost us eventually. I anticipate that if we don't have that, that buffer, like you said, that things are going to get a little rough for us, and we need to know where we're going. We just need to know where the channel is, and we have a good captain. We need to be assured that okay, it's going to be rough for a while, but for how long, and how much rougher is it going to get? Those are pertinent questions that I think need to be addressed.
Well, I don't see the roughness simply because you got an
you're selling-
automobile, and if you decided that you want to curtail your expenditure, you park it.
No, but
You don't use it, and sometimes you can't give out misinformation to mislead people. What I'm saying to you,
Who's
you
asking
cannot
for
have,
misinformation? We're not
you
asking for
cannot, you
misinformation. We're
cannot
asking for information.
here make a statement that you got a 20% increase when it doesn't happen. You might have a slight increase, maybe a 2 or 5%, as the case might be, as the price fluctuates.
No,
But
no,
it
no.
doesn't take such
no,
a such.
Stanley, no, Stanley. You check. You're buying. You're selling. You're not buying. But I know that when
I am buying and I'm selling.
When I compared one of my bills, for gas, and I compared to what I'm getting now, it has been at least a 20% increase.
Oh, you want me to tell you something?
Well,
A lot of people don't even calculate
Well, I have my stats.
when their
so-
engine running and they stop on the road to talk to somebody, not understanding that they're burning up fuel.
So what does that have to do with
It does have something to do with it.
That
All
gas-
these
no,
dynamics within
No,
the
we're talking about
cost.
the unit price, darling. We're talking about the
Even
unit price.
the
for
unit
the,
price,
for the, for
because
the,
you go there and you fill up, and then you want to know what your bill would be, because that's what you're talking about. The end of it, what your bill would be, and
No,
something
Stanley, you missed the point.
I
You
have
missed-
not missed
I
the
think
point.
you missed the point.
I have not missed the point.
I was trying to articulate the fact that now I'm getting less for the same amount of gas, and I think it is reflected in per unit on the bill. I mean, when it was 10 something, it is now 13 something. When you do the calculation, if it goes up by that much, you have at least a 20% increase.
Well,
I asked the question a couple of weeks ago whether or not this might have been something seasonal, because I know, like in the States, in the season, it has the seasonality associated with it. In the summer, because people consuming more gas prices tend to go up because they really have an issue. It is the demand, right? That is where the market forces really, you have the true reflection of your market forces, the supply and demand and the price and all that. And I do appreciate that. But I'm saying beyond that, I know that we've been getting this deal, this sweetheart deal, because it was a sweetheart deal, because imagine that even the 40% that we were required to pay, we didn't even have to pay it back, in cash. If we wanted to send some of our produce there, they would take goods, they would take, even if you had a doctor that you wanted to send there to work it out, those kind of arrangements were being made, and that is what we call a sweetheart deal. And I'm just concerned about it, and I'm asking, where are we getting gas from now? If anyone knows where we're getting it from now. If it is outside of the region, are we going to just see that, government say, let us waive the common and external tariff on this commodity, so that it could be a little more easy for people? That's the question that I want to answer. And maybe none of us here could answer it. Maybe we have to ask the Premier and ask the Prime Minister, who is responsible for national security, because indeed it would be a national security issue.
we will always have fuel, because in the private sector, the free enterprise system, the supply and demand, those are the factors that drive the availability of that commodity.
Yes, but you ask. I'm not saying that there's a shortage. The question I'm asking not is whether or not we would get it, but it's the price which is the concern. Right now, this fuel surcharge is up, and I have not heard any explanation for it. I don't know if maybe something was posted, because when I went to pay my bill last time, I didn't really look around to see that, and I didn't really get my bill either. So maybe there was an explanation in it. I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
Go back,
Well,
the
things
very,
are back to normal now.
the very first thing I said, economies of scale, and all those are the dynamics.
The things are back to
Yeah.
normal, because I don't think the Petrocarib arrangement was quite normal. It was just a sweetheart deal, too sweet, really, because it had a lot of motive associated with it. It's an expansion of our political ideology, and I think that was the real reason. To be friendly to these places,
Quite so.
which we appreciate very much, of course. I mean, we wish it would have never ended, but that type of arrangement normally would come to an end, sadly so it did. So I would say things are back to normal, and normally it's really tough and hard. I understand what you're saying, Pat. some kind of insight must be had by the administration and see what they can do. But can they really do anything really in the markets? We would have to probably get accustomed to the rise in price. But we would always ask a question because we have to deal with Nivlek, and that's always a kind of a problematic situation. I understand the Premier said they have a lot of problems there. The source of the problems I don't understand quite well. But in terms of protecting the people as it relates to the hike in fuel prices, can't really the government do much. I mean, prior to the Khyber arrangement, the Petro-Khyber arrangement, political arrangement.
And they got paid back.
I mean, things were what it was. Which
Maduro
was
just got paid
we were
back.
getting along with it. Of course, I mean, things here just a little more expensive than anywhere, as I realize. But what the other day I stopped and think, and I'm saying I'm happy to be alive to really see this, playing out before my eyes, because I think when things like when it once happened in the Caribbean, in Grenada, we were really small in the 70s or 80s, and to see what is going on in Venezuela now and how it has impacted upon the region and look at the players and the game they are playing is quite interesting.
Okay, Niall, let me just take this and get back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
However, good night. And good night to your panelists. And the lovely lady there, Miss Bartlett.
Good night.
However, if we had, notice I say we, if we had the geothermal, we wouldn't have been on this topic tonight. I'm not bashing anyone. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Naya?
Yes, Webo, and we spoke of the Venezuela situation. I don't want to drift too far away from the crisis, but the Pat's concern about the prices, and that should be all of us concerned. I myself haven't even had the chance. I don't look at the bills when I go to the gas station. I just let them throw in gas. I realize some stations give you more gas. I'm trying to go to those that give me more. And I won't call the name, but I try to go to those that give me more. Sometimes circumstances, I find myself at the worst one. And I don't understand that part either. Maybe Mr. Stanley can give an explanation about that. But to see how these islands can be greatly affected by political ideologies as it relates to America and the other players in Venezuela. Mr. Stanley had a lot to say when this thing started, but I'm not sure if he have, kind of put it aside, because it has become so clear that it's not just the actions of the Venezuela government. It is really and truly America created circumstance. And I'm sure, as I say, I'm happy to be alive to witness that, to see the human suffering just for the establishment of political ideology in the region. And as Mr. Stanley said, the Petro-Khyber arrangement is bearing fruit right now, because CARICOM leaders can't say much on the matter, because they find themselves between a rock and a hard place here. I mean, Venezuela has been our friends and they have done wonders for us, but we can't speak up on the matter. Otherwise, we might simply become the enemies of the U.S. And so, we got to deal with we got to play it safe. Mr. Stanley, any comment from you on that?
You have to be able to make
Let
a
me get a break, and then we'll come right back. This is Thought That Get Results with Conrad Nye Liebert, Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand, and Dr. Patricia Bartlett. We'll be back after these.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. They have got over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Oh, and remember, they are open all day Saturday to serve you better. Builders Paradise, located at CAP Southwell Industrial Park, St. Kitts. Call them today at 466-4938.
Back in this episode of Thought That Get Results, Mr. Stanley.
Yeah, some people might have just one way of measuring things, but when you look at it, I would say categorically, Maduro has now been paid back for his fuel because he's still in power, and based on the arrangement with that Petro-Carib deal, the Caribbean community, somewhat, some of them supported him, some stayed aloof, as the case might be. And there are other arrangements coming from the Organization of American States where one cannot interfere in the other's business politically. And there are agreements signed, and it is rather complex. If you don't get all the information, you cannot analyze this situation in depth. But you look at stability in this region, political stability, and you look at the economic stability and the economic growth because of political stability, and then you make your comparisons in terms of quantification. When you got wars, like in the Middle East, people are dead, economies can't grow, people can't be educated. That is, it speaks volumes for all people in this region to have economic and political stability. And if you were to truly look at the cost of fuel and what is going to occur, because Venezuela is beginning to go down a path of instability and might create a vacuum and draw all of us into that instability, where we got coups after coups, military coups, and therefore we have no real political and economic stability for the growth of this region.
You know, Mr. Stanley, that's
Ideology.
an interesting point. Coming off what Naya said about the ideology, and I think I made a note of it, the expansion of the political ideology. And he was saying that how happy he was or is to be alive to see the resulting effect. Because a part of that expansion of the political ideology in the region, in Dominica and other areas that get the help from Venezuela, what happened was the Prime Minister and the government in those areas were able to, on a weekly basis, give handouts to people who keep looking forward to it and so on and so forth. You're getting handouts, it suggests that you're not working in a lot of instances. And then you get an idea what will happen when the handouts stop for a person who is not accustomed to work. And then you've been using a word all night, instability. And then you're in trouble.
And the piper comes to collect for his tune.
And then, in terms of political ideology again and the economies, do you have a thinking based on the model that America uses, the capitalist system, where they, for instance, say that the best engine of growth, Edric, is what sector?
The private sector.
The private sector. But the question is, does the Caribbean by large, do they practice that? Or is it the other way around?
No, we have a good private sector in the Caribbean because you've got many companies that provided jobs, as the case might be.
That's by theory.
Not by theory, in reality.
Work with me. Let's take our island, our particular area, the last 10, 15 years. which has been the biggest engine of growth, the public or the private sector?
The private sector has always been.
Theory or facts?
No fact.
Well, let me ask Mr. Brand. Mr. Brand, to the best of your knowledge, you don't have the hard figures, but in our island, who's been employing most of the people over the last 10 years?
I want to put it in a different way, Webo, that I believe that the governments would have been one of the entities that would have been expending quite a large sum of funds.
And just for the listening public, the government will fall under the public sector.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
But that doesn't mean that the
No,
government...
but Mr. Brand is
What-
who I meant when I said go ahead.
Well, no,
Mr. Brand
all right, go ahead.
was
Go
making
ahead,
the-
Webo.
Mr.
Can't let you
Brand-
guys get away with it.
No, he's not getting on
No, no,
Mr.
no,
Brand.
Webo,
Mr.
Webo.
Brand is just
Honorable, go ahead.
presenting. Mr. Brand is just
Yes.
presenting the facts.
Yes, go ahead.
And I call on him because of the
It
on
seemed
the
as though
position.
he had stopped. Anyway, go
Webo,
ahead.
the fact is, Webo, that the public sector, the government, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, has been, in my mind, and from what I've seen, has been the entity that have had the largest outlay of expenditure to try and push the economy along.
Okay. That's a statement of knowledge and therefore fact. You dispute it, Mr. Stanley?
He said expenditure. He didn't say employment. He said expenditure.
Well, hence employment.
But what I'm saying to you is that the government
No,
takes
so,
in revenue.
so went on. He said, my question to you is, you dispute what he said?
Yes.
Okay,
When I say
go
dispute,
ahead.
what I'm trying to indicate when I said yes, the expenditure based on the fact that the government has to get involved with public projects, roads, water, the development of the country, education, you name it. But if you were to look at the numbers in terms of employment, whether it is nationally or regionally, the private sector, in terms of numbers, creating employment, the private sector is larger than the public sector.
So in other words, you don't dispute Mr. Brand by
His saying
by
that the
what
expenditure.
is right by in terms of the fact. You don't dispute the fact.
The government does spend big money.
Now walk with me.
Yeah.
Walk with me. Based on the statement of fact that Mr. Brand made, you don't dispute it. That's what you're saying.
No, because obviously.
Walk with me.
I won't walk with you.
Nonetheless, you are producing some theory which disputes it.
Well, you look at the private sector. Let me just bring to the fore the expenditure of Park Hyatt. That's a public. I mean, that's a private sector investment.
I don't
Put a
think
pin
it
in
is
it.
exclusively
Put a
no.
pin in it, Mr. Stanley.
Well, when I say that,
Nope, most of these projects they
Where the
have
funding come
SIDF
from?
money from.
Let him go ahead.
Most
you
of
gotta be
those
careful with
projects.
that.
Dr. Bartlett, you ever did fishing?
Look.
Online?
look,
Dr.
No,
Bartlett?
no, my father
Oh,
was a
well, let me
fisherman.
teach. Well, let me teach you what your father did not tell you. When you're fishing online, you put on some bait, and when the fish take a little nip, you don't get excited.
Oh, okay.
You let it swallow.
Okay.
So let him go ahead.
so
And remember what he said last week?
Yes.
Well, I think I
I'm
wrote
well
it here.
reminded.
I think I wrote it here.
yes, you got it there, Webo, and
when you-
it
when-
happens to all of us.
Right. So
It
let's
happens to all of us.
let it happen again. Go
But
ahead.
I would say to you, I do not see the numbers. I know the government has heavily invested in order to keep our economy afloat in terms of employment, and you name the whole 9 yards. But when you look at the capital outlay, I do not know who paid for the land.
Mr. Brand, you were not here last week, but what he said,
You have it with
which
you?
yes,
Oh, yes, and I could tell you what I said.
Yeah, tell Mr. Brand what you
I
said.
said, let me stop speaking before I run myself into any more trouble.
He actually said that last
Yeah,
week.
well, you're sure.
What
I mean-
happened? He said when you go on and on, you can run into trouble.
Right.
Right? So that's why.
It happens to all of us.
Right, and it's happening to him again.
But what I'm saying to you is that you have to have the hard numbers. I do not know exactly how much Park Hyatt spent for the land. I don't know.
You come back with Park Hyatt again, and Mr. Brannan, and Dr. Bartlett.
I don't subscribe to the notion that they're correct. Let me repeat that. I do not subscribe to the notion that they're correct.
By your own theory,
But
I will
know
let you
that
go
based
on and on.
Based on what the government has contributed for the building and whatever it is, that's a different matter. And let me leave that there.
Right, because
All right?
if you
But-
don't stop, you might just run in trouble.
When we look at other private sector investments,
Edric,
yes, well,
just give me a second, right? Walk with me.
oh,
According to the great Edric W. Stanley, when you go on and on, you can sometimes run into trouble. So let's leave it there. I'm helping. You've been with me
I
for
can work with
30-something
you,
years.
I will
so,
work with you.
So let's.
I will work with you.
Right. So let's take a break and then come back with something else.
well, not every investment.
Good idea.
That's like when they had the big financial meltdown, and then you end up getting a bailout. So we'll be back after these.
From Queen City, Nevis, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, Vaughn Radio.
Back in this episode of Thought That Get Results with Dr. Patricia Bartlett, Conrad Nye Liburd, Edric W. Stanley, and the Honorable Spencer Brand. Now, I just wanted to go on to another topic. I mentioned it last night, and it was quite a bit of discussion over the past 2 weeks, and it was this new policy on marriage and when you can get citizenship. And there's been quite a bit of discussion about it. And in explaining it, someone said to me, well, I think I was listening to news, and one of the authorities, one of the officials in the department that deals with immigration and Prime Minister's ministry and so on, said that what they will do, they're going to police these marriages, so to speak, and ensure that, my word, one for a better term, that they're real. To make sure. And I thought that's fascinating. So how do you do that, Edric?
Well, I just heard a little bit of it, but at the same time, we must understand clearly that those people who come from further afield, they will try to do everything possible to stay put in St. Kitts and Nevis. Marriage has become very lucrative with reference to those who truly latch on to our people. And therefore there are different categories. Some people marry for love, some people marry for money, some people marry for convenience, and that is the aspect, I think, that our government is now beginning to police very closely.
So that's maybe the real part that is puzzling me. It's almost akin to religion. How do you disprove that I am that I am a Rasta man, and therefore, as a consequence, you need to let me practice my religion by having the holy sacrifice? That's what you call it, Naya?
Sacrament.
Sacrament, yeah. That's what it is, Naya? So if I declare I am, of that religion, how do you determine that? And so the same thing now, you just pointed out you have different types of marriages. So how, well, I'm just searching, just help me.
There are people who obviously would get married and it wasn't for love. and it wasn't for money, but it was for stay.
So in other
And it
words,
doesn't
now,
happen here
but,
only.
yeah, but you know, I'm being educated. So in other words, now they have some ceremonies that when they go, they say, like, you are getting married for.
They got to be scrutinized.
So really, so at the ceremony you will say, this marriage between A and B is for love, and they write that on the certificate.
No.
So how does it go? Well, tell me.
Well, you have church and state.
Yes.
And in that regard, the church is not going to get into the reasons for you getting married.
So the state does.
The state now is going to try and scrutinize the arrangement for.
Give me an example, just to help me.
There are people, I can't call names, I won't call names.
Don't call
A
names.
and B, use A and B.
But there are people from Guyana.
Well, why are you calling Guyana?
Well, I'm just saying, other places
Yeah,
who would
right.
come here
Yes.
and because they want to stay here, they're working, they see the possibility of making a better living, and they've looked at somebody, or somebody has looked at them and said, look, I'll marry you for.
So how the state knows that?
This
Right.
it has to do its investigation.
Really?
Sure, the state has to do its investigation. There
Well,
are people who have come in here.
Well, okay. To continue the example, how would the state investigate such a situation? How would they go about it?
Well, I don't work for the state, you know, so don't put me-
No, I mean,
But
I-
we are having a conversation.
Yes.
And I'm saying to you that the state obviously would look at people who, some may have been deported, and they came back, and all of a sudden, when they looked and checked the immigration record, this person, what is this person's status? And when they do track down that person might say, here, I'm married.
You see, I think this discussion on this topic is important because it does not just involve the state making laws and making decisions. It involves the people who live in it, so to speak. And so people must understand how it works. People must understand that if you get married, and it is, you just said it was different kinds. So if you get married for love, the state might do an investigation and conclude it wasn't for that. Really?
Quite true.
Really?
But it depends on who's doing the investigation and the conclusion.
Rebel, Rebel,
Yes.
if I may, I just find that the whole thing is just not being handled properly. There are provisions in the Constitution for various things. We have a Constitution that we got since 1983, and we have done nothing whatsoever to change anything in there to make it better. If we recognize that we have all these shortcomings or these inefficiencies and all that, and there are things in the Constitution that we don't like, it's not everything that would require a referendum to change. Some things require 2/3 in the Parliament. Some things obviously would require, the involvement of other people, the electorate at large. Why is it we're not having that conversation? Why is it we're talking about having to go and police people to see why they're married? You have people in divisions married to one another, and they're not married for love. You have some women who marry to men, just for stability, to get, and that is marrying for money too. So I don't understand. This is just being absurd as far as I'm concerned. We need to see the changes that we could make, and those, I'm wondering, why is it we're calling ourselves out? And I said to, a politician, this is like scoring an own goal, Why is it you're going to say, hey, referee, we over here, we infringing, Why is it you're going to call attention to these things if you're not going to fix them? We ought to have something as it relates to reforming what we have to get a better constitution. I've looked at other constitutions, because since this came up, I said, let me just read to see what other people in the region have. I went and I looked at the one for Jamaica, for instance. There have been numerous attempts to amend their constitution from the time they got their independence, And along the way, you see, because in the document you see where amendments would have been made. Why is it we have people who ought to be legislators who are not looking at addressing these things? Why is it they always some kind of remedial action to fix things? And it's just ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. We were promised that we would have some reforms, and it's about time that it is being delivered. We ought to be doing it piecemeal. I think we're not going to have no major overhaul. I know Mr. Stanley would like to have a constitutional, whatever, what you call it, conference or whatever, to get everything in place. We don't need that. But little by little, we need to improve on what we have. I was reading the same section, and then I see something, and maybe I missed something when I went to English class. But I'm seeing colons here, semicolons, there are things that sometimes, and then I'm hearing lawyers, referencing, the Constitution that we have, that it was, some not so, complimentary words being used about the people who would have negotiated it to begin with, But it's about time that we collectively, we use our brain. We are 98% literate, and, still we're at this stage that we're just handling things like we're just not ready yet.
But is it really the Constitution, though?
Yes.
Or it's just a matter of...
It's the Constitution.
Because I learned that there are a number of big international, very big countries whose Constitution is very small. It doesn't... The Constitution itself doesn't address every single or a lot of the everyday things.
Can't.
They cannot. They address the major things, and then you make laws.
Parliament.
The Parliament, to address a lot of the other things. Anyway, what I wanted to also mention, which I had last week, it was a little quiz or a riddle to go on to the next section. And as Dr. Bartlett mentioned the Constitution, see whether or not everybody, I'm going around the table, can put these things under one heading. Constitutional reform, electoral reform, corruption, integrity, freedom of information, animals, monkeys, donkeys, voters' right, poverty, livable wage, and so on and so forth. Anybody can put all those under one heading. Dr. Bartlett, with you. Let's go to you first.
What heading?
Yes, one heading.
Change.
Change. Well, change will fit under those. That would be an example as well. But your heading will be changed. Naya.
Election language.
Naya. Sorry. Yeah, Edric.
Well,
You put it on the evolutionary process.
Evolutionary process. Mr. Brand.
I'm wrestling with this one, Bobo. I would probably
Election language, man.
I want to see something about the people inside India, because I think
you can use that as an example too. But I didn't. The list wasn't exhausted, so there could be other things.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But just like put them under one heading. Things like you can say things like that will be under. I mean, Naya said election language. Yeah.
I don't know. Maturity.
Maturity.
Mature. Coming of age.
Yeah, I think
Naya came closest.
Naya came closest. Election coming. Election near.
That's the way.
No, Naya said election
language.
Election language.
But you all will agree. Every time you begin to hear these words and phrases and so on, you know election
coming.
Yeah. Good. That's you're good at, Edric?
Well, we know the election coming, there was something they kind of throw things in
those
there.
are the terms and phrases you
Yeah,
you
true.
hear.
But
Good
you know,
evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. Can someone who becomes a citizen by marriage register to vote?
Could you go over that again, please?
Yes.
Someone who becomes a citizen by marriage, can they register to vote?
Once you're a citizen,
Yes.
you can vote.
Absolutely.
The right of a citizen.
Yes.
Once you're a citizen, you can vote.
You have that
It's
right.
no difference how you.
Yeah. But
Economic citizens can vote too?
well, I hope not.
Oh, yes. Well,
But
No,
at the
why
same
not?
time,
Well-
I don't think.
Okay.
I
I
hope
don't
not.
think so. But maybe again,
I
Mr.
hope-
Brand
I
will
hope
help us
not.
out with that. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yeah, I was asking another question. Can somebody who becomes a citizen by investment, can they register to vote?
Okay, that's the same
think so.
question.
They
I
claim
al-
they claim that it is in the
Yeah,
law
I
to
almost. Well,
because Parliament could indeed,
no,
restrict
maybe
those
you
people.
can. I'll tell you why. Just from my own analysis, because the qualification to be able to vote in the Constitution
citizenship.
says once you are
a citizen.
not a citizen,
Commonwealth citizen.
yeah.
no. It says once, yeah, Commonwealth citizen, yes, living here, right? Once you are living here for,
1 year.
I don't even, it's probably the law
Domicile.
says that, the thing. Once you're domicile, yes.
Yes.
So it doesn't say anything about citizen for St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay. Yeah.
So once you're Commonwealth citizen, right? So, you know, Montserrat, Dominica, and so on and so forth, and you're here, and you're domiciled here, you can. So in that particular aspect, you don't seem to have any particular advantage because you are a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis.
No.
As you know, ahead of the others.
And a lot of
I
us
think
is
what
vote.
happened, Britain perhaps had looked, you know, at all of us,
Yeah.
all the islands as one.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're in Antigua, Montserrat, or wherever.
You're part of the kingdom. As the
But Webo, I find that a very dangerous thing, you know. So you can get married today and you have rights to claim citizenship from tomorrow.
Well, you have to go through the
apply,
process.
you have to apply.
You go through the
Well,
process.
well, I say rights, yes, you have to apply. You,
That's the
you,
first
you
step.
can apply
Yeah.
from tomorrow. And what would prevent you from not having citizenship in due time?
What is due
But
time?
right, that's the question. Maybe due time depends on who you
Investigation.
are and perhaps the connections you have.
Really,
Yeah.
arbitrarily might be applied.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of things are done that way. Even a lot of the laws are written that way, in the judgment of the minister.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
Which is
but
constitutional in my
explicitly,
view.
Like in Jamaica, though, it's like you must be married for 3 years. You know, it specifies in the
Yes.
Constitution.
Yes.
So any law that comes after that,
That
you know,
sounds more normal to
must
me,
be right. You know,
you know. So
and other places like that,
I
they
mean,
specify
so
how
a-
long you
a
have to. But
government in power-
ours did not.
a government in power can make arrangements to get 250 marriages take place. And because they're the one who would be dealing with the applications and so forth, see it go through
Yeah,
and,
they-
and impact on the elections.
But that's why you
and
need
so
to
forth.
remove. You need to remove that.
You know, Pat, I so much agree with you with this constitution thing that they have here, because you know a simple troublesome area like that, really and truly, instead of making things sound so foolish, really.
But
and
now, if you reform it, it
process.
doesn't necessarily mean it will solve the problem, because we had more song and dance about electoral reform, and we did reform it. And as soon as we reform it, we said, let's have it again. We agree with that. That's a
I'm saying,
fact.
but
So what makes you feel
marriage thing is
that
quite
if we
specific.
reform the Constitution, we will get an Edric W. Stanley Constitution? Remember that one?
No, but he's
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about specifically
It's
to this
specific,
issue,
that
though.
specific
If this is an
issue as
issue
it
that
relates
affects
to-
most people, and people
to-
feel highly
it's
about it,
marriage.
Right,
and we
but
think that
it's-
people ought to be here,
But it
ought
might
to
be
be
the-
married for at least 4 years, then I said amend the
Yeah,
but it-
Constitution.
it might
It's an
be the-
amendment that is required.
It might be, that's what I'm saying, it might be addressed. But depending on who makes the final decision, they might not address it to suit the suggestion that you are making.
Well, I mean,
Because
I don't know.
because as I said, from 1983 perhaps, they've been saying that our Constitution is flawed.
Yes.
And every time an election
doing
is
anything about
but
it.
this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. And the same people who argue it is flawed gets into the position and works it. So the question is, if it's not just we're doing a lot of talk that, intend to get no results just because you find it is a good strategy to get you where you want to go.
No, but you know, Webo, it's simple fix, you know, because other places recognize that if you have women in charge, you're likely to get change. You know, look at the issue that we had, you know, with the shooting of these people in Australia. Was it Australia and New Zealand? New Zealand?
New Zealand.
And right, New Zealand, and within short order that, you know, was fixed, you know.
Well,
and
how
placed
you
in
going to get them?
legislation.
Well, here's my question to you, now, Dr. Bat. How you going to get them in charge? When, as an example, you have in the United States right now about 23 Democratic candidates running, about a half a dozen of them are women, and they're doing the constant polling all the time, and you know they split down the vote, who is voting for who. And Biden is getting the most of the women vote.
Okay, fair enough. But
And you have 6 women in there, and he's tripling and quadrupling them in terms. So the women are going and voting for the men. So how are you going to get them in charge?
But guess what? In South Africa, you just had the appointment of half of the cabinet in South Africa are women. you know?
Appointment?
Yes, by
Okay.
appointment. Because
Okay.
the president decided that, you know, we're
So
gonna
the,
appoint.
so the answer is have them appointed.
That is an answer. That is
Oh,
an answer. It might not
well-
be something that everybody likes. The same thing that happened in Ethiopia.
No,
You know, when
I'm not.
last year when
I'm,
the
I'm
in
not
2018
suggesting.
after the half of the parliament, well, half of the cabinet, sorry, half of the cabinet are women
No,
appointed by
I'm
the
not
prime minister.
suggesting whether I'm against or for it.
I'm just saying
I'm
how it
just
could be done.
right. So, but you're not suggesting to by voting.
That is a suggestion, yes. That is a suggestion. That
But
we
you know,
Edric.
we ought not to be making it. I'm not asking, you know, and this is not. This did not originate with me. This is a thought that I picked up. Someone said we ought not to be making it easier for women to get into position. We ought to be making it harder for men, because right now it is being skewed in that men, it is being made too easy for men. If you sometimes see the quality of the men sometimes that, you know, end up, you know, being representatives, and sometimes you have women who have better qualifications, and it is a fact that right now most women leaving university, or rather the people leaving university, most of them are women. Women going into the workplace is usually more equipped as it relates to educational achievement than men. You know,
If I
but
get
they're
you
just
right,
not getting the best break.
if I get you right, Dr. Bad, you're suggesting that in some instances you have men in certain positions when, in fact, there are women out there who are probably better than them.
Yes, that's a
And
fact.
you're not suggesting, but you're not suggesting the reverse is not true.
I'm not
Where you have women in positions, but there are men out there who probably can be better than them.
I'm not suggesting that.
Oh,
personally.
okay.
No, I wasn't
Just
suggesting
checking.
All I'm saying is that women ought to be given a better opportunity at the level of representation, and then we just might see change. Because for the past how many years we've had men in charge, and we're not seeing any change. No significant change.
But when you say given, when you say given,
From since
women
1983, we
should
have
be
a
given.
constitution. From okay, the elections are coming up. Federal elections are coming up. Why are we even contemplating using the same men that we're using on a local level to go to represent at a federal level? Why?
It's simply because the women expect to be given rather than for them to.
Boy, you
But
always
you
began-
just mentioned about they should be given, and I'm saying to
Yes,
you,
give them the opportunity to run.
let them use their initiative to get in there.
Oh, dear.
Nobody bars them from.
Yes.
Who bars them?
Yes, they're being barred. Yes, they're being barred. You have women who.
I personally
I'm
don't
aware
subscribe to
of
that
women in
notion.
these political
You
parties.
have to generate the will, generate the capacity, and the determination to be in that fight in order to gain what you are looking for. You kept talking about give.
I said give the opportunity. Allow. Okay, let me not say give. If that is not a word
Mean
that
the
you're
same
comfortable
thing.
with.
Allow mean
Let
the
us
same thing.
allow women to participate, and then we would see meaningful change. Until then, we're not likely to see any change. I'm convinced of that. I'm
what
really
pre-
convinced of that. And people ought to understand that man not change nothing.
What prevents the allowance?
Men are not changing anything.
Well, why
You
don't?
prevents
Well,
the
let me
allowance?
let me ask
You have
this.
one
Let me
woman
ask,
prevents
now.
the allowance?
You're gonna change. You hear, oh, we need change. We need change. Election come, you change. You go from A to B. Then you hear, we need change. You need change. You move from B to A. But you're not getting any fundamental change. Constitution ought to have been changed, amended along the way. Men don't have no time for that.
What prevents
And it is
the allowance?
It is frustrating.
What prevents the allowance
I have
of
time
women?
for the Constitution.
Because
be-
men want to dominate, always not giving women a fair chance.
Giving, the word again, giving.
I said allowing women a fair chance. You have a problem with give.
Allo-
You
They
need
mean
to
the same
allow
thing.
women. You see, all right now, you ought not to be saying, let me go feel the same candidate that we feel at a local level.
let
Where
me
does
take
that
this.
happen?
Good
The
evening. Thank
Constitution
you for
gives you the-
holding.
The only other place that happens.
Good evening. Thank
I
you.
just want to say that women are not prevented from running for office. If a woman wants to run for office, all she has to do is to present herself. Nobody has barred women from running.
The caller is correct. That's what I'm saying.
And I agree with Mr. Stanley. If a woman wants to run, all she has to do is to present herself as a candidate.
Yeah, but women are not getting the encouragement that they need. They're not
But
getting the
encouragement,
opportunities that they
The
need.
encouragement. You want to run, you're going to run. You join your party, you're going to run. So
No.
you're going to encouragement.
It is not as easy as that. It is not as easy as that. Men bar women. And we're talking about a kind of brotherhood that they stick to it
I do
together,
not
and
agree with
women
that.
cannot
Sorry, I
advance
do not
in
agree
any
with
political. Women do not get a chance to advance in any political party.
Create
No,
your
no, no,
own
that is
board.
wrong.
You tried,
That
eh?
is totally
You tried. You're
wrong.
not gonna get far because men go bar you out. You're gonna
No.
be voted out.
That is
You're not
not
gonna
true.
happen.
That is not true.
Did you get an
Sorry.
opportunity to run?
That's a fallacy.
You think it's because
And
you're not
that's
as
a
good as the men who are there?
That's a couple.
You're
Courage.
you're probably better than them. But at the end of the day, who voting? You think it's just women? Women don't get a chance to
You
vote.
have to generate the courage
What courage?
to
It's
run.
about- it's about making sure that men, they need to make the decision that we are going to allow 50% of the women in the parliament. And in order for them to do that, you have to tell some guys, sit down. You cannot run this one. You already did the last one. You already hold elective position. You already the representative. Why you represent at the two level? Huh? That is just being ridiculous. Because what you're trying to do, what you're doing here now, you're concentrating all of your decision making in one small little clique, and that does not bode well for the whole country.
The only
You
thing
need-
I would
you
add
need
to
diversity.
the only thing I would like to add to this discussion is the same thing I've always added to the same discussion over the years. In 2016, Hillary Clinton ran on the premise, one of her big platform was starting to break the glass ceiling. And her mantra was, vote for a woman, right? And she got a lot of momentum. They had a study group, a focus group of women, and they asked them whether they will vote for Hillary. And most of them said no. The interviewer asked him, why not? Wouldn't you like to see a woman be president? These are women we're talking about. They said yes.
But not Hillary.
But it doesn't have to be her, and it doesn't have to be now, right? So sometimes be careful what you ask for. You might get it. So maybe some women may break through, but maybe it may not be no Hillary.
Yeah, but my
Because
fundamental
right
point-
now, for instance, in that same context, you have 6 of them running right now, right? But it's not her, Hillary is not one.
Right.
So that's just my only just Naya.
I'm just
Well,
saying
you
that the
know,
women
well,
have
I
to
don't
generate the
think-
courage,
I don't
generate the courage and get into the fight, get into the fray. And if you have the capacity, you have the intellect, you've got all that you've just mentioned, why not make the final step? What is preventing you from making the final step? That final step must be given to you, or you must be allowed. No, you're going to take it.
Well, first
You got all the rights to take it.
I suppose you got to be understood. But there's nothing wrong with Pat asking for easier pathway for a female in politics. Over the many years, they've been kept down, and I think they
You keep them down?
They've been
The
kept down by the
system.
system,
The
man,
system.
you know, the
The
church
system.
and the institutions of
The male-dominated
the
system.
male-dominated thing, man. Come, let's be fair.
But Naya, but let me say this.
But-
well,
but-
if the women feel that they've been kept down, right? The person who just disagreed with Pat is a woman as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The example that I gave in the United States that's coming just now, and I like to use those examples because people don't take it personal, right? Right now you have 6 women running, and when they're doing the polling, Biden and the other guy, what's his name?
Bernie Sanders.
And about 4 or 5 men getting the biggest chunk of the women vote.
But that's
So
okay.
maybe it's better to use a strategy by saying, instead of arguing for the men to go and give the women a chance, maybe you should tell the women, give the women a chance. Because if these women begin to get the biggest chunk of the women vote, they will be the one prevailing to be the candidate.
Both men and women have to give them a chance.
No,
I
but
believe
let's-
there's an established psychological indentation here that exists. You get me?
But you mean in the women?
Eh?
In the women?
No, in the global
But you're
population.
not
as
listening.
we know it
but
in
you're
the
not.
West.
But
You
I don't know. I
celebrated
don't know
it.
if you're hearing me.
Yeah, but.
I'm saying. Let me use
I
let me use a hypothetical. If you got 25, 30 of us in this room, and we're putting up Dr. Bartlett to be the president, and 25 women are among the group, 5 men, and we're putting up Dr. Bartlett and Edric Stanley to be president. And when the vote comes in, Edric gets 25 votes and Dr. Bartlett gets 5. How you explain that? You're still going to tell me, no, what you need to do is give Dr. Bartlett the votes?
Well, at least she's in the contest.
But-
And that's the point
Well,
sometimes.
that's what the
you need to
caller
get,
just said.
and
The
you need
caller
an easy
said,
pathway to get to that point.
but the caller said, the caller who called and challenged Dr. Bartlett says, if you want to run, you present yourself and you run. What's wrong with that?
Nothing is wrong with that. But they got established political parties, and we find is that reluctance to give them.
You wanted to run, Naya?
that ventilation.
Naya, you wanted to run?
Yes,
You ran?
I ran.
Did you join an established political party?
No.
But you ran.
But maybe that's why you lose. Maybe if he was in an established party, he might have win.
So then, what you want? You want it to be given. You want to actually get success before working for it. I don't subscribe to that kind of notion. I like people who are not lazy in terms of physique or mind, as the case might be. Go for it. You see it. You want it. Go for it.
Okay,
No,
let me
meaning
put
no.
let me
Prepare
put
yourself.
No.
Mr.
Prepare yourself.
Mr. Brand is there and he is too cool. So let me go to Mr. Brand. Mr. Brand, you ran twice. You ran first time you failed.
Yes.
You ran the second time you succeed. Next election, will you run again?
As of now, my mind is still set on
Okay,
running
good.
again, Webu.
So what if someone makes the argument and said to you, this lady, you done win already and you done serve, so you move out and give this lady a
Well,
chance. You will say yes?
Our,
Based on purely on that?
not necessarily,
Okay.
but our political organization have a process whereby if any individual wishes to be the candidate, they would have to, in the first instance, we have these.
Okay, let me just
constituency-
take this, Mr. Brand. I'll continue with you. Thank you for holding. Good evening.
Good evening. Why not form a woman political party?
Could you go over that again?
Why not form a woman political party?
Okay.
Takes courage.
That's a solution, but why should you have to do that?
It
You have
takes
to
courage.
You have to establish parties already.
It
All
takes
my
courage.
proposition is this. I'm saying you already have people representative at a local level. Why are we not considering using other at a different level of decision making. Why is it we're going to duplicate? So if it is that you have someone who makes good decision here, okay, you concentrate it. But if you have one who has bad decision here, then you're compounding it. Yes?
No,
So
no,
I'm
no,
like,
no.
you need
don't-
diversity. You need diversity.
But the Constitution, the laws allow diversity.
I'm not saying that the Constitution doesn't. We already agree.
But this is what I'm saying. So you have to follow it. You have the law
We're
is
not
there.
exploiting it. We are suggesting that you should not exploit the deficiencies
Go-
in the
let-
Constitution.
Let's go back to Mr. Brand.
Yeah, well, I was explaining that the party that I'm a member of have a process that if any individual, man, woman, wishes to be the candidate in any constituency, there is a process where they go through the constituency, various constituency group, and the constituency group have an internal election of whoever they wishes to recommend to the executive, and then the executive would, I remember when the Honorable Vance Army would have declared his intention to retire from local politics on the island of Nevis. There were two candidates in Gingerland, and Eric Evelyn would have come out of the winner. There is that process.
There was a woman too, or it was just him and who else?
It was him and Mr. Truss, Stedman Truss. Those were the two candidates.
There you go. Not a chance for a woman.
No, Dr. Bartlett, if any woman wanted to, they could have
Put themselves up.
Yeah, but if you decide though that you would like to diversify, you would like to, have the involvement of women at that level, then you can, and it has been done in the past. So don't tell me about what the Constitution your party has.
I went through that process to become the candidate in St. Paul's.
And maybe they could have found a better candidate. I'm not saying
it was
that they couldn't. I'm just saying there should be a little more inclusive of women. Go out. Okay, women have all these inhibitions or whatever it is. You have to work with them. You have to bring them in if you believe in diversity. And I'm saying that if we don't at some point accept that we need more women in decision-making positions, we are going to suffer. We're not going to have any changes to the Constitution. We're not going to have any changes to the meaningful changes to policies that advance this little nation.
I hope that the young people are listening. But don't be daunted. Generate courage whether you're a male or female, and go after your dreams. If you want to be a leader in our country, nothing should stop you. Prepare yourself. And once you have prepared yourself, the community and the country will see your preparation.
Mr. Stanley, let me take this. I'll get back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good night, Weber. I've been listening to your program earlier, and I keep hearing you appealing to the other people in the panel about theory and facts. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you keep trying to distinguish between theory and facts. You hear the gentleman there again talking about there's a selection process where people can put up themselves and they go through a process through the constituency. That is just theory. The practice is, in truth and in fact, is that the leader has a say, and sometimes have the power to choose who they want. That's a fact. The other way around is the theory, the way it should be. And that's what the gentleman is exposing. So I just want to say that be mindful when that we're talking about theory or practical, all right?
You're not suggesting that the example that Mr. Brand gave is not true, is not a fact.
No, that's theory. That's how we.
No, but it is a fact.
But that is what happened.
That is what happened.
That's reality.
That's reality.
That's reality.
And that happens in all the cases.
No, he gave a specific case, and you're challenging his case.
Well, but that is one in so many.
No, but he gave you a specific case because it was referenced, and he gave the facts.
Yeah, but that is one in so many.
But
it is not something that is.
Yeah, we understand that. But what we're saying is, in this specific case, I mean, it's indisputable.
Yeah, that's a fact, yeah.
Right.
But, like I said, that is just one.
No,
My reference is in general.
oh, your reference is general, but you did you did point that out.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so you agree then?
I stand corrected, yeah.
Okay, all right. I got you.
All right, man.
Okay. Who I needed to go back to?
What I was saying is that we have to become aware, fully aware, that people are listening. The young are not, and those who are not so young, and therefore they must be guided by certain realities. Nothing prevents you from becoming what you want to become once you have prepared yourself. And I'm saying to everyone who is listening, prepare yourself if you want to be a leader in our community in any form. You want to be a political leader? Go to school, get the education that is required based on what the community is expecting of you. Present yourself as a likable person, as the case might be, and do all the other things. And there are mentors. The Honorable Vance Amory, the Honorable Mark Brantley, the Honorable Joseph Parry, the Honorable Roberta Hector, the Honorable Spencer Brand, the Honorable Eric. There are so many leaders whom you could get mentorship from. And therefore, ask them what did they do to arrive
they joined the boys club
at that level. You got Nurse Jean, you got Nurse William, Miss Brandy Williams. All these are leaders in our community, and all you need to do is to tap into their source. They will be able to give you the guidance. You make the preparation, and you go after it. Don't let people tell you, oh, it must be given to you. It's not going to happen. Some people do get. But again, you have ways to be stamped out and not getting. And therefore, prepare yourselves and go after what your dreams are. I participated, and if I had gotten elected, I would have served. I might have not have served for any more than one term because of the way I think. I believe people must become responsible, people must become productive, and ultimately, people in your community would determine exactly who you are. Leadership just doesn't come overnight. It's a process based on how you build, and build or build.
As you said that you participated once. You mightn't want to tell them, but let me let your colleagues know that today you and I met at an establishment in Charlestown, and there was one person, well, more than one were around, who, in response to a question that I posed, they basically said that if you were to run again, they'll definitely vote for you. Which means, and suggests to me that if you participate again, based on, how you have prepared yourself over the past, since that time, you definitely will be more successful. You agree with that?
I would agree with it, but it doesn't mean that it would be thrust over the top.
And you agree that what I said is correct, that the persons who were there did say that they will vote for you, and they also basically suggested that they know all of their friends would.
But Webo, I would not be hoodwinked and be misled. You understand me? Because this process, in terms of the political process, it's a game, and if you don't play it well, you can't win.
Well, there you go.
You can't win.
So you didn't believe what the ladies were saying today?
Well, boy, I took it with a grain of salt. I'll tell you. The lady might be listening, but that's being honest. Because a vote is very sacred, When a person goes in there and votes for you, whether it's because the person believes in you,
You don't think that those ladies there today had believed in you?
Webo, again, you got to be very careful when it comes to politics and vote and for the ascension to
No, well, educate me.
a power.
You know, yeah, okay.
Power level. You got to be very careful. And there are times people will tell you, and that's what you want to hear. But don't be misled. Because
I got you. I got you.
the reality is that when the votes are counted, you would know the winners and you would know the losers. All right?
Yes.
I mean,
At your feet, sir.
I think like a statesman. I am not a politician. A politician, like I've said, knows the game and plays it well. There are people who call themselves politicians. But if you can't win and you don't win, you're not a politician. You like the game, but you have not played it well. But people who have won are politicians and they play the game well because the end result is that you have won.
This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening for On the Mark. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Talk that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.